this.
Yes. Okay, Debbie, let's come back to the UK then and water.
Yeah, let's look at water. Let's remember that the United Nations, their Sustainable Development Goal 6 is water. And what they say is that Sustainable Development Goal 6 is integral to the success of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So basically, if you can't get success with Sustainable Goal 6, the whole lot falls apart. But the United Nations have got a very flourishing water department, and WaPOR is 10 nations all building more water capacity and clean water capacity. But WaPOR is the Food and Agriculture Organization, part of the United Nations. And indeed, in November, we're coming up to World Toilet Day. I believe it's going to be held on the 19th of November. There's a very sweet story about the hummingbird. We'll probably talk about that in extra, but it would seem that they want to identify all of us to identify as hummingbirds. And apparently 5 billion people are living without safe toilets. Well, I've got news for everybody because I'm one of them, and I live in the United Kingdom. And as many of you know, water, sewage and toilets, for all the wrong reasons, are a big interest of mine. But what does the WEF say about water? Because at the end of the day, of course, it all comes down to money, and they want to achieve it requiring a public-private collaboration. But let's look in more detail about how they're looking at that. And they're actually citing Thames Water and the disaster of Thames Water, because when they took over into a private company, they had to bear the debt of its own acquisition, leading to higher prices for consumers whilst driving the utility near bankruptcy. And you can see that there's been over 300,000 discharges of raw sewage into our rivers. But who's in control of water? So I went to look at the Global Commission of Economics of Water, who have brought out this report called Turn the Tide. And they basically say, again, that if we fail to, on this water sustainability SDG 6, then the whole lot will collapse, and we must move with urgency. So then I went to look at who runs this commission, and I found particularly Professor Mariana Mazzucato, but also, now I'm so sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce his name, so I'm going to call him Tharman. But I want you to take notice of both of these characters, Mariana Mazzucato and Tharman. I'm just going to call him Tharman, who's the president of the Republic of Singapore. Now, just to give you a bit of context, we're going to show you a bit of video from the WEF in a minute. This was a year ago. And the first person you're going to see is Tharman. Now, Tharman is the president of the Republic of Singapore. He's got quite a wide pedigree: economist, London School of Economics, Cambridge, Harvard. He's on the board of trustees of the WEF. He's a member of the United Nations. He's also part of the IMF. And Professor Mazzucato, who is the second person you're going to see, she's an Italian-British economist, and her pedigree, or her CV, includes, I'll mention a few names so that you get the context: University College London, European Space Agency, Chatham House, the World Economic Forum, the European Commission. She's also chair of the WHO Council of Economies of Health. She's also been an advisor for the Labour Party, and she's worked for the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy with the UK government. So that gives you a bit of flavour. So let's see what they were saying, a very short clip of what they were saying about water at the World Economic Forum.
It's not just equity in the traditional sense. We should all be very deeply worried when a significant part of humanity doesn't have access to clean water and their lives are affected. But it's also equity that goes hand in hand with self-interest everywhere in the world. Because if we don't solve those equity problems, we're all going to be affected. And that's what it means when we say it is now a global commons issue. Equity and self-interest come together when we want to solve the water problem, just like when we want to solve the problem of the climate crisis. They go hand in hand. And that shift in thinking is also necessary. Equity is everyone's interest. everyone's self-interest everywhere in the world.
Can I add something just based on what you've just said? That's also, of course, true with COVID, right? We are all only as healthy as our neighbor is on our street, in our city, in our region, in our nation, and globally. And did we solve that? Like, did we actually manage to vaccinate everyone in the world? No. So highlighting water as a global commons and what it means to work together and see it both out of that kind of global commons perspective, but also the self-interest perspective, because it does have that parallel. It's not only important, but it's also important because we haven't managed to solve those problems which had similar attributes. And water is something that people understand. You know, climate change is a bit abstract. Some people understand it really well. Some understand it a bit. Some just don't understand it. Water, every kid knows how important it is to have water. When you're playing football and you're thirsty, you need water. So there's also something about really getting citizen engagement around this and really, in some ways, experimenting with this notion of the common good. Can we actually deliver this time in ways that we have failed miserably other times? And hopefully we won't keep failing on the other things, but anyway.
So not many people understand climate change. Everyone understands water. Are they weaponizing water? And in the UK, of course, they want us to pay for all the leaks and the sewage discharges that have been going on. So probably £156 more on your bill. We still have to pay the water companies. And for anybody that's interested, Channel 5 tonight, 7 o'clock, swimming in sewage. But I've got news for the water companies. We're not just swimming in sewage. Some of us are living in sewage.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.